I guess am I audible? I guess hi, am I audible? Can someone please confirm? Yeah. So let's wait for 5 more minutes till 6:05. Since it's just six, we'll wait for 5 more minutes till others can join, and then we can start after that. And yeah, Uh, Hi guys, thank you for joining. So let me just stop the screen share before I start. Uh, yeah, so there are few things that I want to say before I start this. I start this. Uh, you can generally I will wait for 5 minutes, five odd minutes before we start the scheduled time. We start this session, and if you have any uh, questions, feel free to type them in the comment box, in the message chat box here, or you can raise your hand and ask them directly. Yeah, someone has raised their hand. So if you have anything, just you can unmute yourself and then ask. And then other thing that I want to say is, uh, I'm keeping this thing open, this meeting link open, so that I don't need to admit you over and over again, so that people can directly join. Yeah. So feel free to, you know, feel free to interact and try to, yeah, try to be present here. And then I try to keep this little interactive, so that we all can learn. So I also hope to learn from you guys, from the interactions. And yeah, so yeah, let's start without wasting much of our time. So this is the course titled Conservation Geography. So myself, I'm Abdul Shakur. Muhammad Abdul Shakur is my full name. You can just refer to me as Shakur also, that's completely fine. Or yeah, please don't go with sir. And I'm a PhD scholar doing my PhD in Center for Ecological Sciences in IISc Bangalore. So this is a slight bit of introduction from who I am. And I had done my masters in wildlife sciences, and I'm currently working in the Trans Himalayan landscape and Western Ghats, trying to understand this diversity patterns in ants, especially. So, yeah, that's me. And as I already said before, uh, this session will majorly. I hope that you guys have gone through the, you know, video lectures that are presented in the course web page. So the thing is, I also had to go through, I also go through them. But the thing is, this session will not cover each and every aspect of that, but I try to keep the broad focus of these sessions with respect to syllabus, and trying to bring in some new set of ideas with respect to the same concept that are being taught in that sessions. Okay. And so that you can get to learn more. But more, and the other thing that I want to say is, like, most of the if you are trying to credit for this, writing the exam in the end of this course, I would try to suggest to stick to the class lectures also, because the questions for the exam or the assignments will be mostly in the syllabus that is being dealt on the website. I will be dealing with some of the concepts that are being taught. It's not like I will be covering entirety of what is being taught there. So just keep that in mind. And then other thing is, you can, yeah, if you have any questions, try to raise your hand and then feel free to ask, or you can unmute yourself directly, because I might not be able to see, because I just have one screen at this instant, and then I'm currently working remotely, so I don't have much resources at my disposal to be able to do it much smoothly. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or type in the chat box so that I can check it out there. Okay. And I would like to keep this interactive. And then since this is the first session, uh, if you have any doubts, I would like to, please, you can put them in the chat box also regarding to any of the topics that are being covered in the syllabus, because that's what I would like to do majorly, help you understand some of those concepts better, and then try to bring in new ideas. So from the next session onwards, the way I try to approach them will be based on that. And then, yeah, and then we'll also try to check out the assignments questions also later on. So yeah, let's start with what we have been dealing with. So if you have gone through those lectures, the first thing, the main thing that we are dealing here, the course itself, is conservation geography. And then the word conservation all starts, from two words, con and survey. Con means together and survey means to keep. And then broadly you can think it as, define it as preservation, protection, and restoration of the natural environment and wildlife. And it is really, you know yeah, it is really interesting to understand why should we conserve. So we know that, a lot of us talk about conservation, but why do you guys think we should conserve, be it environment or wildlife? So yeah, guys, please, if you have, why do you think we should conserve? Let's talk about environment, broadly. Why should we conserve our environment? If you don't feel like uh, talking, you can type it in the chat box about why do you think we should conserve. Hi, someone started typing, to promote sustainable development. Hi Bohar, we'll come to you just after this. After what we are trying to discuss, I'll just come to you. If you have, please type your doubts in the chat box. So someone said that it's to promote sustainable development. Okay, and to have to keep natural resources for our next generation. Yes, and any more ideas or any more thoughts on? Okay, so that animals, fossil fuels don't get extinct. Okay. Okay, these are some interesting thoughts. So most most of them are kind of, in related to us. So basically here what we are trying to do is like, we should be able to sustain ourselves in the long term. It's not like we are trying to increase efficiency. So it's not like we are using what all stuff is there, be it fossil fuels or be it some other natural resources, uh, but to be able to preserve them, and then so that they can be, given with to the future generations. Okay, that's one good idea. That's one line of thought. And any other ideas? Because this is what we think in terms of our human use, right? Like in terms how it's going to be beneficial to us. Okay, but if you think it in terms of how we have modified the environment, you know, the things are much more broader. So why should we conserve? It's such a very, there are n number of reasons, and what you guys have pointed out are one of the main dominant reasons. But these reasons you can categorize them into, human use categories. Okay. Just before going ahead, I would like to say that, uh, yeah. Hi Bohar, you have asked something about the exam form. So I don't know much about the exam forms. If you have any doubts, I think you should contact the support team on NPTEL webpage or Swayam, whichever portal you are accessing this course through, because I don't have much control over that or any idea about that. So it will be better if you can contact them through mail. Okay. And someone also said that to make sure that things are secure and together. Yes, it's kind of keeping things intact or the way they are. They or at least they used to be before we started modifying them. That's what I think it does. So why should we conserve it? Because we have changed things from what they used to be to what they are currently now. And then these two stages that we are looking at are drastically different in lot of these places, be it ecosystems. For instance, if you have gone to Western Ghats, most of these areas have been fragmented. What used to be original, ever tropical forests have been fragmented by different land use, either be it conversion to tea plantations in the most southern parts of Western Ghats in Kerala, to cause coffee plantations in central Western Ghats, to other land use across. It's not only the case of Western Ghats; it's across all of the land use. And then these kind of imbalances, the way things have been, at least the order that things have been. So if you remember the concept of, you know we all know that Earth is so many years old. So Earth is these many years old, and then we had started dividing them into these eras or epochs, and then these ages, so that we can better remember based on the events that have gone, that have happened. For instance, if you remember, the Jurassic era is the era that is famous for the proliferation of reptilian creatures, especially the dinosaurs, and so on, so on. And then this current era that we are in has been termed Anthropocene, because we have modified the environment so much, and then the effects of us on the species, or be it the species or the way things are in this era, have been that much that people started calling this era Anthropocene. Is basically the era that is influenced by humans, because we have started modifying things, and then they are drastically different. Okay. uh Hi, Bohar. I had no idea about what you are trying to say, because I think you better contact the support team on NPTEL with that registration. I think you need to just pay once, but I don't think you need to pay multiple times. But it's better you contact them. I'm sorry. So the PPT taught on Swayam app. I have no idea, man. I'm sorry. Uh, I think you can just access them, but I think you can be able to access these presentations. I think it will be shared to you also, these presentations, and then the sessions will also be recorded, so they can be, so that you can view them later. But I'm not sure about whether you can where you can download the PPT that is taught on the SYM app. You, so yeah, so that has been the Anthropocene, because we have modified the environment and the way things are so much that we started calling the age that is influenced by humans as Anthropocene. Yeah, that's just one depiction of how we have modified, be it the overuse of natural resources or complete change of landscapes to you know different biomes. So one of those another reasons why we should conserve is this concept of climate change. I think you guys all might have you know heard about it, witnessed the witness climate change in action. And then if you remember in the news, it says that for this whole past 1 year have been the temperatures have been considerably 1.5 degrees Celsius higher than what it was in the previous decade. So it says that we are already the temperatures are already warming up for yeah, and then there are also extreme weather events. The thing that is currently happening in Pune and Mumbai, the monsoon, it has hit and then it has caused a lot of flooding. Not only there, and then the things that have happened last year in the Himalayas, especially Himachal and Uttarakhand, where a lot of rain battered, and then there's a huge loss of property and life also. So these are some of the drastic effects of climate change. These are direct at the time effects, but there are some effects that that are much more long term. Like for instance, is this concept called range shifts. So range shift is basically, let's say there is this bird, uh, let's say on this left, that has that likes these semi-warm temperatures, let's say 25 degrees Celsius, and it lives in the forest, in in the mountains, okay. And then as the temperature gets warmer, so the thing is, in the mountains, as you go with the elevation, as you increase the elevation, the temperature drops, okay. So at the base of the mountain, the temperature can be 30 degrees. At the top of the mountain, the temperature, depending on the height, can reduce to, let's say, 15 degrees. So the species can survive at the 25 degrees Celsius. So as the climate warms considerably, so plus 5 degrees is every elevation, there is a considerable increase in the temperature, the 5-degree increase. So the species can only tolerate that temperature limit. So it tries to shift where it's ranged to that elevation. And then what happens is this gradual shift pushes the top species out of the elevation, because it doesn't have any, no, it doesn't can't there is no place where it has the favorable environment to sustain itself. And there are species that are continuously pushing them from bottom. And then this is like the escalator is going on, running on, continuously. And then this leads to extinction. And this is kind of getting exaggerated by climate change. This is a natural process in some areas, but this has been getting exaggerated by climate change. So this is one of those effects that climate change has, which is caused by, which is being increased by us. And then if you want to picture it like this is how it can look. So if, let's say for instance, there is a species, let me just, yeah, for instance, there is a species that tries to that likes to live around the water body in the forest at this elevation. As the elevation changes, the vegetation also changes. So this is a concept of zonation in species in plants that you see in a lot of these areas. So as the elevation changes, the vegetation also changes. With warming climate, what happens, the vegetation also kind of slightly shifts upward. And then similarly, the associated species also tends to shift upward. Yeah, someone raised a hand. Ramesh, yeah, you have something to say or ask? Sorry? Yes? First slide. Oh, Oh, sorry. Let me just check it again. Now you can see it, right? Okay. I'm extremely sorry. Thanks for pointing it out. So yeah, let me just go just a couple of slides you might have missed. So one this is the slide that I was saying where I was talking about different epochs and Anthropocene being the epoch that which has seen considerable impact and alteration of the environment by humans. Is it changing or not? No, right? Okay. Let's just stick to here. Yeah. I think there's some issue with from my end and I apologize for that. But yeah. So yeah, this is just a depiction of how we have modified the earth and then we are kind of killing it, the extreme modifications. And this is what I meant, what I was trying to say when I was talking about the escalator to extinction. So just let's say this species, let's say it's 25 degrees Celsius. As the temperature warms considerably, it has to shift upwards to track that suitable climate that is available for it. So it just keeps trying to fly higher or try to shift its range higher up on the mountain, because this is a phenomena that you can see predominantly on the mountains, and that's why you get to see images representative in the mountains. And then as the species tries to move upwards, and at the peak the species that are already living at the peak, they don't have any more top area to go, so they kind of go extinct from the top areas. And that's the same fate that is seen for all the species if if the things doesn't go back. Okay. And then similarly, this is the place where I was saying that the vegetation also shifts and showed us the species associated with it. And then this picture also depicts this thing. If you have remember the concept that was taught in one of those videos, the concept of tree line, right? Can someone say what is a tree line? Or someone, can someone, have you guys heard of the tree line? Edge beyond which no vegetation. Okay, you are close, but that's not the exact thing. There is vegetation beyond tree line. Yes, you are there. So Rohan, you are right. Above height, above there is a certain elevation or the height which you can, whatever you call, above which you hardly get to see trees, but there is still vegetation that you see. So tree line is just the trees, but there are shrubs, herbs, grasses that can go above the tree line. Okay, so if you have gone to, so in Himachal and Uttarakhand, if you or even in Kashmir, if you have gone to these mountainous regions, there are these meadows, alpine meadows, which these meadows you can see or encounter beyond the tree line, and these are called bugyals locally. So these are majorly formed by herbs, grasses, and all, because there is no vegetation that goes beyond the. So there are no trees there. Because there are a lot of factors that contribute to why there are no trees. They could be either because of the availability of water. There is also a thing, as I was saying earlier, that as the elevation increases, the temperature drops considerably, and then there is the in some places at higher altitudes there's the phenomena of frosting, where leaves or plants get they they get damaged by frost. And there are also winds. The higher winds might not be, most of these trees might not be able to tolerate those type of winds. So they are some of these abiotic factors kind of are the ones that determine where you see the tree line, and then you can see them properly, like in this image. If you can see, it kind of ends here, but here you can think the slope of the mountain as one of the determinant factors for for determining where the tree line is. But mostly there are other factors that also determine where the tree line kind of forms or ends. And then beyond the tree line, the landscapes also turn really pretty. If you have gone, you can really appreciate them also. Okay. And then one of the other reasons, due to climate change, we all know that the temperatures are rising. The temperatures are rising because one of the reason is the greenhouse gas emissions are increasing. One of the major greenhouse gas we all know is carbon dioxide, right? And then it not only increases the temperature, uh, so carbon dioxide also kinds of dissolves in the oceans, and then when it dissolves in the ocean, it forms bicarbonate. It forms it undergoes a reaction and forms bicarbonate, and then this leads to acidifications of oceans. The water gets, the pH of the water goes down, and then you can call the oceans are acidic in nature because of this. So you might be wondering, as like the we have huge amount of ocean, and it's like 70% of the surface is covered by ocean. So what difference can it make? It can make a lot of difference for, it may not make a difference for us, but it can make a difference for species like shellfish, or or corals, right? Which actually have make their exoskeleton or the skeleton from calcium carbonate. When if you see the previous reaction, the carbonate itself is getting converted into bicarbonate, so there is hardly any carbonate left in the water for the animals to use to form these skeletons. So what happens is, as the oceans get acidic, the carbonate is not there, so their body structure itself is weakly formed. For instance, in this mollusk example shown here, the skeletal features might not be formed properly, so there will be skeletal deformities, or the skeleton will be very thin. So these are some of the effects that you see on the marine mammals, and then this can have drastic effects because these guys are prey to other fishes, and then in the end we might also be trying to feed on those fishes, and that the populations go extinct, and a lot of people's survival might also get affected. So a lot of these things are kind of interlinked to each other. And then other important thing is this concept of invasive species, right? uh, so what do you guys think? So I have shown here two famous examples of invasive species. One is lantana. The whole name is lantana camera on the left, which is a plant native to South America, and is a inva- invasive not only in India, across also, but in India it has wreaked havoc in lot of protected areas, especially if you go into drier semi-arid regions of India, and then these guys are everywhere. You can't even walk through a patch where lantana is there without injuring yourself by from the thorns. And then a lot of animals can't even eat the leaves because they are not used to that. And then on the other hand, a native to our landscape, Burmese python, is an invader in USA, in especially in the Everglades or Florida region. And yeah, so have you guys heard of any other invasive species that that have might be in the news, even be it from India, outside India? Eucalyptus, it's is it an invasive? Invasive. Okay. Because Prosopis, because I don't think Eucalyptus might be that much invasive as much as Lantana. I'm not sure. I have not heard that Eucalyptus is invasive in India at least. It's an exotic tree. Yeah, it's a non-native tree that is sustaining itself for invasive species. So the definition is kind of little tricky. It should be able to sustain itself, and then it should cause havoc on other species also. Prosopis, you might if you have visited these semi-arid regions of India, be it Karnataka, Kerala, Andhra, or Gujarat, Rajasthan. This Prosopis is everywhere. That is one invasive species. That's also, I think, native to South America. Yes, African catfish. It's such a nice example of marine or aquatic invasive species, and it is everywhere in most of our water bodies. Even tilapia is another invasive fish. So Asian carp, yes, some of the fishes, and even there are ants, there are beetles. So ants, there's an yellow crazy ant that you might have heard. If you are from Western Ghats, you might have seen that ant, orange colored ant that goes crazy over. So yes, common myna is native to India, but it's invasive to other regions in the Europe and all, and even red-vented bulbul, the bird that you see in some most of our cities, is an invader outside India. So one of the reasons, why do you think these species became invasive? So one of the criteria we call, one of the reasons why we say invasive, it's not supposed to be here, it is here now, and then it is spreading up, right? So there are multiple ways the species might have spread up. Which ways do you think it has spread up the most? It can outcompete others. Yes, most of the time invasives tend to outcompete other species because there are multiple reasons. Either because they are exploiting the food resource or the habitat that is not commonly used by other species, or sometimes they don't have natural predators in their ecosystem. Like for instance, this case of Burmese python, there is no natural predator in the Florida region of America. Or even this lantana, there is no natural predators. Like there are beetles that feed on flowers and leaves, or miners that you don't encounter in India in their invaded region. So there is this hypothesis called predator release hypothesis. So there is no more predator to control it. So this species had just exploded exponentially. Yeah, Chinese mitten crab. So some of the routes of dispersal for invasive species is pretty crazy. No, and then for instance, the case of Burmese python, most of the invasives that have happened in America are case of pet release. So these guys grow up very, very big. I think more than 20 feet long. So what happens is after a certain time you can't really sustain them as a pet anymore. So just people look out for you know a wilderness area and they just go and leave it there. That happens most of the time. And then these guys manage to survive there. They reproduce, and then the populations explode. Sometimes unintentionally it happens. Like for instance, there is this plant called Parthenium, also called as Congress grass, if you might have heard of. It's also non-native to India and an invasive in most of these regions. So what happened is, the story goes like this. So during during the import of these species came up along with the import of rice paddy from other country, and then it happened during the regime of Congress. So they named it Congress grass, but so unin- land I will come to that. So the thing is ki unintentional introductions also happen, and sometimes deliberate. Like for instance, the case of lantana is, I remember reading that this was around Bangalore or Mysore. It was introduced by the Britishers as a floral attractive plant. So in the gardens they were planted, and then they used to be grown and properly taken care of, and then this they spread out from there. So there is accidental introductions, or there is deliberate introductions, and then there is garden introduction for most of these plants. Lantana is such an example. So yeah, and then if you want to learn more about that, there's this group called invasive species specialist group, if I'm not wrong. And then they have select set of species that are, they classify which are the 100 most invasive species that are causing a huge impact on ecosystems worldwide. There are a lot of plants, there are a lot of insects, there are a lot of birds, mammals also. Mammals, there are a lot of rats that cause havoc in islands, especially because ships carry them, go down. And even the case of Chinese mitten crab, which someone has pointed out, I think Alvin has pointed out, is these most of these marine transport happens. Most of our goods are shipped through marine transport, right? So for balancing the ship when it's empty, there is this thing called ballast water. So these are these large tanks that hold water, and then once the ship reaches the destination, or it was supposed to be, loaded again, they take out the water to balance the ship again. So when these, so the water that ends up from one place to another, they kind of carry the larvae or the younger stages of other species, and they kind of populate it there. And then some also travel as pests also. So for instance, you imported paddy, there is the beetle that feeds on paddy, for instance, and then you don't know that it's a beetle, but it came here, and then the population expanded because there are other plants it can feed on. So that's how most of the introductions also happen for invasives. uh, so why did climate change is causing an increase in ocean temperature, then that cause shift in the organism? You mean shift in the range of the organism where the organism is present? So if it's so, because because of greenhouse gases, if you know the concept of greenhouse effect, it will be much more easier. So the thing is, let me just go over quickly. Greenhouse, this there are this set of gases: carbon dioxide, methane, even water vapor. These acts as greenhouse gases. So what happens is, when in the morning when the sun comes up, these gases capture the energy, the heat energy, and then tries to hold on to that, and that kind of actually increases temperature and then keeps the surface of the earth warm during the night, because these guys have captured some of the energy. So as the concentration of these gases increases, the amount of energy they capture and hold on from the sun incident radiation, it's kind of goes up. Okay. So as it goes up considerably, so the heat has to be going somewhere, be it the land or be it the water, or just the atmosphere. It just sticks around there much longer. So that can actually lead to rise in ocean temperature, right? Because the whole temperature, the whole surrounding is much more warmer than what it used to be. So the water also tends to warm up. And then, if you remember the example of the shift, the escalator to extinction that we were discussing earlier, the actual area or the temperatures at which a species can sustain itself uh, is fixed. So most of the species can tolerate certain limits. So as the temperature kind of increases or decreases or varies, the animals tries to track that range that we specifically need. Okay, so let's just think of this example. You might have been hearing in the hello, yeah, you might have been hearing in the news that as the summer comes, a lot of tourists flocks to Manali, or in Uttarakhand, a lot of these places, Shimla, even Masuri and all. So this happens because people wants to be in a comfortable temperature. They don't want to be in areas with that are too much hotter. So they want to look out for places where it's considerably okay is temperature. So they want to go to those places where there are actually the temperatures, which happens to be these so and so places. So similarly, the same thing happens with organisms. So as they try to move towards the regions that have these the temperatures that are good for them, or what they feel they're comfortable, you see shifts in their distributions. So yeah, most of these things are kind of related to each other in those things. And then yeah, going with that, we also, you can think it of as ecology. So for us to understand some of those things, we need to understand how animals interact with their environment as such, and then what determines the distributions. Then only we can say this thing has changed, so this species has shifted. For the temperature has changed, so the species has shifted, because the temperature is the factor that is actually is preventing the species from going around. So that's where understanding the in and out of the species is really important. I hope that was clear, Alvin. If you have any more, you can ask, or if you're not convinced, we can talk about it a little while longer. Okay. Uh, I think then that was clear. So going ahead, yeah. So there are multiple some of those reasons why I think we should conserve. One of the my view of why should we conserve is because we have changed the way things are, especially the environment, the earth, and a lot of things than what it was to a completely entirely different state. So that's why I think we need to conserve. And some of the concepts like climate change, invasive species, are some of those things that are actually the result of what the changes that we have done. And then these are the reasons now we think of why we should do conservation at the earliest. And then similarly, the other part of this course, geography, this is a thing that we have been, I think, studying from school level. So it's basically understanding yeah, how earth and the processes and the phenomena that happen on the earth, or the features of the earth. So it's a region, it's a field that deals with all of these things. Be it it can be formation of mountains, or it can be the formation of monsoon, or all these things. It's basically trying to describe the earth, the exact meaning of the word geography means. So yeah, so biogeography is one subfield of geography where you try to understand, the patterns of how species are distributed, or how life is distributed on Earth, and then why do we see such patterns? Okay, uh, so can you guys think of some example of biogeography, of why some species are present somewhere and why some are not? Since we are discussing that thing, can do you guys know of any patterns in biogeography? So I just said that distribution of life on earth is polar bear. Yes. Okay, what about polar bear? On where it is present, is it? Okay. So, yeah, let's talk about the example of polar bear. It is present only in the Arctic Circle, in the polar region, especially the colder areas, right? So, if you want to understand, if you're trying to study where all the polar bears are distributed, or the other contrasting example is camel. It's like you see mostly in the dry regions, especially the deserts, be it the cold deserts in the Tibetan Plateau and Ladakh, you see some camels, and then be it in Thar Desert, or you see other species of camels. So yeah, so understanding why species are present where they are. So first thing is like where they are present with respect to geography, and then trying to understand why they are present and some of the factors that contributes to their presence. So yeah, so there's this interesting thing since we are talking about biogeography. So Alfred Russel Wallace is the first person who, actually kind of came up with this idea of biogeographic regions. So biogeography is a distribution of species, and then you classify regions, the Earth, based on the distribution of species. So what we call as biogeographical regions, and then so there are five. Uh, yeah, six biogeographical regions you can think it of. Palearctic, which is the most of the Europe and Northern Africa. Ethiopian, which is the south of African continent, most of the African continent. The Oriental, which is Indian subcontinent, and most of the Southeast Asian countries. The Australasian, Neo, Nearctic, which is the North American, and Neotropical, which is the South American, and then uh, Equatorial American countries. So this is the idea he came upon. Alfred Russel Wallace, he traveled across most of these countries collecting animals and plants and animals, and then based on the distribution of species, he came up with these regions. This set of species tend to look similar in that some of those characters, versus these species are entirely different. And then we also have this classification called New World versus Old World species. So New World is Americas, the North and South Americas. Nearctic and Neotropical regions are also referred to as New World, because explorers from Europe went and found that these locations, and then they call these areas New World because they already know this, the other half of the world existed, and this is new for the discovery, so they just put that as New World. So that is also another classification, but that is not biogeographically correct, but this is what is currently accepted as biogeographic regions. And there's an interesting pattern that you see, especially here in this region. It's called Wallace line. So between New Guinea and then Sunda Island, no? They're the species. These two islands that if you can see on the screen are. Let me just zoom in a little bit. Yeah. So these two islands are not that far, but the species that you see on this island versus this island are entirely different. So they say that there is some invisible line that is kind of determining what species are present here, and then what are present on the other side of that line. So they termed it Wallace line after Wallace, because he's the one described the presence of this distinct species just across this patch of water. So this is an real interesting pattern that this biogeography has just puts out. And then similarly recently it has been updated, the biographical regions have been updated from new studies, because we have a lot more data on not only the species but also on their phylogenetic data information based from DNA and all key what all species are there. So when they make these clusters, so it has been further broken down into much more categories. If you want to remember, you can remember, but most of them, there are new categories such as the Oceanian, because these oceanic islands, Papua New Guinea, Fiji, all these islands have been clubbed into Oceania. Panamanian, which is like the tropics of the Americas, have been put down into a new biogeographic region. And then Sino-Japanese, which is the Tibetan plateau to the Japan and Taiwan region, is come into another biogeographic region. And even Madagascar gets its own biogeographic region because of its uniqueness. So this is the recent classification of biogeographical regions. And then, yeah, similarly, if you think of India, uh, based on the type of, you know, India is also classified biogeography into many other regions. Like for instance, if you might also know about the Western Ghats, the Peninsula. Okay, Deccan Peninsula versus Trans-Himalayan region, Himalayas. Uh, yes, biogeographic regions are mostly based on the distributions of species. So they are, as of now, most of the data, since when it was proposed, if I'm not wrong, I think when it was proposed it was based on plants and animals, mostly mammals and birds. So it has been for lands, and then oceans, I doubt there will be such hard boundaries. There will be some sort of boundaries, but since oceans are kind of far more connected than lands, big land, so those regions, it might not be, you know uh, yeah, it may not be easy to delineate whether the region exists or not. You can buffer some of those regions and say, into the some till some territory of the ocean, but you can't really say for oceanic regions. Let's say, for instance, if you want to say it for oceanic regions, you should be able to know what all species are present in which all regions, right? To be able to classify that. So I don't think it considers most of the uh, oceanic regions. It is mostly on land-based forms only, continents. Even the recent paper, that the ones that I was talking about, that has updated. If I'm not wrong, they have used plants, animals, and birds, mostly the continental species. Because, for instance, if you take about the example of a blue whale, which migrates from north to south, north pole to almost to the south pole, that you can hardly say, you can hardly delineate regions, because species tend to move between regions very easily than that happens eh, on land, because there are barriers. For instance, talking about barriers, Himalayas, if you remember, is a huge barrier for dispersal for a lot of species. So that kind of acts as delimitation of some of the biogeographic regions. See, coming to that, in here, Western Ghats is one biogeographic region. Gangetic Plains, Northeast India, the coasts, semi-arid regions, desert. These are some of the biogeographic classification zones that you see in India. So, if you know which region you are from, you should be able to identify what type of how it looks like. Okay, and then, yeah, coming to biogeographic regions. So if you look at, so since you're talking about biogeography is basically distribution of species, here is a map that talks about the species richness of plants, the distribution, like how does it looks like. So for plants, if you see, most of the diversity is around the equator. So this is a pattern not only in plants, in most of the species. You see most of the diversity around the equator. So there is high number of species in the equatorial region, especially in India. If you look at the Western Ghats, we have a lot of species, and even in the Northeast and in the Himalayas. Okay, so trying to understand how species are distributed, that's what it looks like if you want to visualize, trying to understand it. And then similarly, we also have this classification of biomes based on precipitation and the temperature it has. Okay, for instance, we are talking about Western Ghats, I said tropical forests because they have the temperatures, mean temperature of 20 to 30, and they also have high precipitation, so they are called as tropical rainforests. While cold deserts have, low precipitation and low temperatures, and tundra has even lower temperatures. And then deserts generally have lower precipitation, as you might all know. So based on the distribution of these, some species are distributed. Okay, yeah, let me just catch up with any other messages you guys might have. Yeah, if you have any other questions, I will be happy to take some of them now. Okay, yeah, if you have any, please drop them in the chat box so that we can go over that. Okay, yeah, so altitudinal zonation is one concept that, that has been dealt with in the class. So yeah, so can someone say what is altitudinal zonation? I think we have already go. I showed some pictures of it, but not really talked about it. So anybody about altitudinal zonation? Yes, zones decided on the basis of different altitudes. Basically, the elevation. Yes, right. Habitats based on altitude. Yeah. So basically, zones you can call them based on set of the way you can delimitate. Sometimes you may not be able to delimitate in some cases, but how the habitat you can call a little better, or the vegetation especially, and the associated species, how does it change with the elevation, and then that can be grouped down into zones. So if you can see the picture on the presentation screen, this is a picture drawn by Alexander von Humboldt, I think from the Andes. I'm not sure which mountain range, but he draws and shows it clearly that how the species actually changes. All these names that you can see is different set of species that you can see till one certain elevation from certain elevation. And then after so you can, so here in most of the mountains what happens is, on the lower elevation you tend to see a lot of these conifers or broadleaf plants, and then as you go down, as you cross the tree line, there are no more trees. You can call that as till that as one zone. Above that zone you have these different meadows, and then so on, so forth, until you hit the rock and ice, which is like the topmost region. So this thing happens due to a lot of these abiotic factors that decide what species can be present, what species cannot be. Okay, this thing you can see clearly in India. If you want to experience how this thing, the best, one of the better places you can see is Eagle Nest Wildlife Sanctuary in Arunachal, which has in shorter elevation, on a single mountain like that is depicted in this picture, the vegetation changes from tropical forests to almost all alpine meadows. Yes, yeah. I'll just give me a second. So the picture isn't of that much clarity, but this is just for visual representation of this. Uh, yeah. So the same thing. you can see it here in this image that we had discussed later about tree line and all. So there are trees that you can see, kind of. Let me just zoom in a little bit more. If you see, the tree line kind of ends here, and there is slight, meadow that is appearing here, and then the vegetation kind of stops here, and then there is no vegetation, and then just rock and ice above that. So that's how the zonation can be here, right? So there are a lot of things that determine the species distribution. Since we are talking about biogeography, so it's majorly concerned about distribution of species. So there are a lot of factors that determine species distribution. It can be biotic or it can be abiotic. Okay, biotic factors include competition, uh, predation, the presence of prey, because certain species are so specialized on certain species, so they can just eat some X species. So if there is no X species, the predator will also not be there. So there's so much specialization that you see. And there are no based on pathogens there, and dispersal, like the species ability to go from disperse from one place to another, migration, and humans. Like in the case of invasive species, humans are the species that are responsible for for the distribution of those species, or else the lantana wouldn't have been India if not for humans who have brought it for floral decorations in the gardens. So that's how human mediated dispersal also happens, and the distributions of species change. Whereas abiotic factors such as habitat, so resources, cover, nesting, so all of them can go into one broader category called habitat, right? If there is no suitable habitat, the species might not be present, and the environment it is in can actually determine where all it can disperse to. Like for instance, the example that we are seeing here, plants require soil to be able to root, and then they need water and all. So if there is no soil and the steep slopes are so steep that it just rock there, so there is no suitable habitat for vegetation to form up there. So the species cannot go there at all, or the temperature is not suitable for the certain species X we are talking about. So the environment is not favorable, but it cannot survive there. So it is just found at those regions where the environment is favorable. So that's how abiotic factors govern them. And coming to biotic factors, some of the biotic factors that I think is covered is allelopathy. Uh, that is discussed there. But apart from that, dispersal, migration are some of those things that actually govern the distributions. Like species that can't really disperse far can hardly be distributed across. For instance, uh, there are a lot of species. Uh, Let me just think of some example. There are a lot of flightless birds. For instance, let's talk about some of the flightless birds that are present in, you know, New Zealand. Since they don't have much predation pressure, they're present there, but they can't disperse because they're kind of uh, uh, much farther, because they're kind of they have lost their ability to disperse because of they have lost their functionality of wings, but they can disperse on foot, right? Also, if you know of shola grasslands in Western Ghats, which are grassland, meadow like patches in between forest on the top of the of the mountains there. So species, there are a lot of species that have been known, especially birds, that are different genetically because they are not able to disperse from one patch to another, because it might be too far, or they are not able to withstand the in between patches. So that's how they regulate them. Coming since we're talking about distributions, for instance, let's take the example of uh, the snow leopard, right? A lot of people might have heard of it. It's, you know, very charismatic species. It's very one of those high altitude top predators in these high altitude regions. And if you look at the map of where all this species is present, it shows, you know, Trans Himalayas, Tibetan Plateau, even up to into the Mongolia, even in Kazakhstan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, these areas. So distributions are is basically, you know, trying is where all the species, certain species is present. Distribute, that is what distribution means. So visually, it is much more easy to understand than putting it in concept, right? So there are a lot of other factors that determine that we are talking about. For instance, for a snow leopard, you know, there is a combination of factors. It needs, you know, it survives in this high altitude terrain where, you know, rocky slopes and all, and then it needs certain amount of prey, certain amount of camouflage for it to able to be successful in this landscape. So yeah, coming to habitat, I hope you can see this slide, right? Yeah. uh, of ABCD, which one do you think is the habitat of a snow leopard? You can write your answers in the chat box, and then which might not be. So habitat is basically natural home or the environment of the species, is the place where the species actually thrives, right? For snow leopard, what sort of is the habitat? What is the ideal habitat for snow leopard according to you from of these four pictures? Or if you want to just describe it, you can also describe it. But it will be better if you can just write ABCD. Second image might be where the snow leopard can reside. It's B. Okay. First image. Okay. Any more? Just simple ABCD. Any of multiple is also fine. Okay, I'll just wait couple seconds more. It's B. Okay. B question mark. Okay. A and C. Okay. For the context again, let me repeat the question. Like, which are the areas of these four photographs do you think is the habitat of a snow leopard, not a common leopard? Okay. B. Okay. Yeah. So let's just go over what all these habitats describe. Okay. First image, if you can see, uh, is mostly looks like a grassland, right? Second is a mountainous region with lot of you know, lot of rocky outcrops. C is a both mixture of grassland and forests, and then D is also a hilly region, right? And then most of you said B, and some of you said A and C, A or C. So B is right, and there is the answer of D is also right. So both B and D, because both are of the same region, but the habitat looks different, right? Some of them is sheer cliffs, which is where the snow leopard actually, you know, can be seen in Spiti Valley. So these are some of the cliffs that it actually uses, even this area. And then since it's a species that you can encounter in these regions, yeah, A and C are, you know, these are grasslands that you see at much more lower elevations. So yeah, putting together, habitat is something, you know, that is natural or the environment of the species where the species is actually present. Here, the distribution of the species can be because wherever the terrain is there, the species can be there, or vice versa with the food or other biotic environments. Okay, so yeah, going ahead. So the other things that also governs species distribution is the Liebig's law of minimum. It was originally proposed to, talk about the yield in, plants, especially for plants. What is the one of those elements that actually determines, how much yield a species can give. Okay, for instance, the limiting element, which is the element that is present in the least amount, is the element that determines the whatever yield its species gives. Here, let's say for instance, selenium. If you can think it of in this type of example, no, you will be able to, I think, better pick it up. So the lowest element here is selenium. It is what determines the production of a plant. But if this concept can be, brought over to other species, other things also, like for distribution of species also. For instance, the prey is not there, or the habitat is not there, whichever is limiting, that can actually determine the, the limit of the species. Yeah, someone asked, will this PPT be provided to us? Yeah, this will be shared as a PDF. I think it will. The link of that will be put up in the, I think, NPTEL portal itself. The portal itself, there will be a link where you can access this. Right? Yeah. So that's what Liebig's law of minimum says, that whatever the factor, there are multiple factors. It's not just not the prey, or just not the habitat, or just not the predator that determines a specific species distribution. There are n number of factors, but the most important factor is the one that is present in least amount to what it was required. Okay, similarly, is the Shale-Folds law of tolerance. Basically, it says that the distribution, the species, for any environmental factor, it has this huge range of tolerance. Like it can, let's say for instance, talk about temperature. It can tolerate, for instance, from minus 20 degrees to 40 degrees Celsius, right? It's a huge range, but there is an optimum range. It can survive, perform better in 10 to 20 degrees Celsius. So you get a sort of bell-shaped curve when you try to understand the range of tolerance, and then lot of individuals, a lot of members of the species will try to be present in this central part of that region, which is called as optimal range. So it's not like species can't survive in outside the optimal range. They'll be surviving. They'll be barely thriving. It's not not surviving at their full extent, but they'll be kind of barely thriving there. So that's what this law talks about. So some of these concepts are what determines the species distributions, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's all I have for today. But yeah, if you have any doubts or clarifications from the concepts, I will be happy to take, because this presentation was short because I was expecting a few more questions or things from you. So if you have anything, go ahead. Or if you have any suggestions on what more should I deal with in terms of concept, do drop. I may pick some of them, not necessarily all of them. But from the next session onwards, which happens on next Monday, my next session Monday, we'll try to deal with some of the assignment questions and try to discuss the answers, not the straightforward one, some might be tricky ones, and discuss them, and then we'll go into the next part. So yeah, species, populations, etc. Okay, so you can think them as a hierarchical concept. Okay, uh, there are multiple concept of species, so there, so it is a little tricky concept, but one of those concepts that most of the people tend to deal with is called biological species concept. So for biological species concept, the thing is, a species has to be, uh, you know a species is all the members of a area can be, called as a species, as long as they are breeding with each other. Okay, there is no crossbreeding across species, but this is, and then produce viable offspring. Okay, that is biological species concept. A species can copulate and then produce biological viable offspring. That means, the offspring can also produce offspring. Okay, population is, same species, members of the same species that are present in a one single geographical area. To say it better, let's think about uh, the example of, let's say, tigers, right? So there are tigers present in Western Ghats, Kerala. Okay, let's talk KMTR. There are tigers present in Northern India, which is, let's say, Corbett. Western India, even in Rajasthan, Sariska, and Eastern India, even in, I think, Namdapha. I'm not sure, but somewhere in Arunachal also. So the species population, all of them are same species. That means, if you take a tiger from Kerala to Rajasthan, they can breed and then they can produce viable offspring according to this concept. But uh, but these are present in different geographical locations. So populations are, of are same species, but are confined to certain geographical locations. We call them as a one population. It's like, Kerala's South Indian population, or Western Indian population, like that. Okay, so population is something within a species. So group of species populations, a species has multiple populations. You can think it of as that. Let me just check if I have a slide for that. Just give me a sec. I will check for that. And biogeographical regions are major classifications, but in case where we have to deal with biodiversity conservation, micro region. Okay. Uh, so, can you just give me an example of that so that I can, you know, okay. Just give me a second. I will come to that. Yeah, let me just quickly share this slide so that we can go over the uh, concept of biological. Yeah, yeah, you can see this slide, right? Biological organization. So individual gives into population, multiple individuals of the same species is what we call as a population, right? And then multiple populations of multiple species will together form a community, and then ecosystem, and then bio. So I hope that is clear. And yeah, so this is hierarchical organization. It's not independent of each other. One is nested in each other. So this till here it's a single species, individual and populations, but populations can be distinct in terms of the way they appear. Okay, for instance, the genetic makeup of a population, like for instance, let's talk about the example of tigers. So the tigers in Simlipal, Odisha, are much more darker because they have higher melanin than the tigers or other regions, because they are from different populations, their environment is different, but they are of the same species. Okay, and then the community, ecosystem, and biome. So multiple communities form an ecosystem, multiple ecosystems form an biome. Hope that is clear. Okay. uh, yeah, let me just go back to that slide. I'm sorry if my video is not clear, because there is hardly any electricity here because of, yeah, nature. Yeah. So so you so if you want, you are saying in case where we had to deal with biodiversity conservation in micro region, university or school level campus, the classification we followed. So for classification, no. So for local level classification, it has, it depends on the region. I'm not sure, but I will look at it and I can let you know in the next session. Okay. But the thing is, like, what it will be for this for. I'm trying to understand it better. So for instance, you want to conserve some species, let's say let's say frog species in a forest patch or in area. So then you look at the habitat characters. Let's say for instance, uh, the there's a stream flowing in a forest patch, and the uh, stream, the region that is close to the stream is called a riparian patch, or close to a water body is called a riparian patch. And then you can classify areas like that based on, the habitat and the region or the type of place it is, and the species that it is in focus of. uh, but the I will look at I can look at it and I can let you know in the next session, because I don't know, I don't know any of them as of now, but I can get back to you if that's okay. But if I'm not wrong, it mostly depends on the s- focal species and the idea of what you're trying to do, and then the some of this, and the level till which you are okay to classify. It's like for a frog, the riparian patch versus non-riparian patch might be important, but for a bigger species, that might not, the classification might not actually work. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah. And yeah, I would suggest please go through those uh, video sessions on the NPTEL, because then only I think it will induce much more thinking. And then the core, you know takeaway from this session is kind of, the reason for this session is kind of, th- it's a doubt clarification session. Okay, and then I can introduce some more interesting concepts to you, so that you have much more information to you at the end, so that you have learned a lot of them, new things. So yeah, I would suggest you go through those things, and then have any doubt, put it up here. Important species in a rainforest, like plants, birds, or what? Like in what aspect? Uh, yeah. For instance, okay, let's talk about the case of Western Ghats, which you might have heard of it. So let's say there are a lot of species, and then every species. So the reason why we conserve is that every species has its own unique role. Okay, but we try to put some increase the importance of certain species, And so that, sometimes we try to do it because they have a huge role, and then they have this impact. Like for instance, this thing called keystone species, or yeah, keystone species, which is a concept where, there is a species. If you just remove that species, the most of the ecosystem will collapse, because this species has disproportionate effect on the ecosystem. If you meant by that, I will come to that. So, for instance, think about how many of you have enjoyed, an afternoon nap or just the shade of a banyan tree around in the village in summer. It is actually, really important thing for the in the village, for us as humans, because it's like it's present at the central location of a village, and then people can come around, sit, chat, or do a lot of things. But similarly, the banyan also, if you sit around at the same time, there are a lot of birds or animals that come onto the banyan to feed on the fruit, because the species kind of, fruits around the time when there are the resources are scarce. Basically, there are very hardly any other species fruiting. Okay, so this species kind of is really important for those birds that are dependent on fruits, for them to survive this season. Okay, when so bunions, especially, they belong to the genus called Ficus, Ficus. So they're really important in these landscapes. And similarly, birds such as hornbills. So these are large-bodied frugivores. Frugivores are birds that feed predominantly on fruits. Okay, so they are all really important because, they are the masters of dispersal in these landscapes. They feed on fruit, they fly to far distances. So in a study in Arunachal Pradesh where they had tagged hornbills, they have seen at least more than one individual flying more than 10 kilometers. So see the distance they can actually disperse. So there are birds like these guys that are actually, are really important. And then there are plants that are actually like ficuses, which are really important in rainforests especially. But the list is not one or two. There are a lot of individuals, but these are the predominant individuals that we get to see examples of them a lot. I hope that was clear. And then similarly, there are a lot of other insects also that are really important, or especially if you know about termites, right? They emerge especially during the monsoon season. Okay, just before the early monsoon or post monsoon, when the ground is wet, but the rain isn't that much heavy. Uh, so what happens is, these termite have alates. There is a reproductive caste that actually has ability to fly, and then when they come out, lot of species are actually dependent on them, and then they come in such huge numbers that lot of species have a feast on them, and then they can survive those harsh periods, or they can bulk up before they go into the migration or hibernation. So, for instance, there's this example of Amur falcon, which actually makes a stopover in Northeast India. Especially, there's a huge. They comes in lakhs in Nagaland, those regions. So the people have found out that, the they actually feast on the termite alates, the winged individuals of termites that actually come up during the monsoon season in the stopover site, so that they can refuel up on their journey to Africa. So then they fly non-stop from Nagaland to Africa, which is huge distance. So the importance of species changes from time to time and location to location, but there are set of species that you can actually call important. Kind of the definition kind of changes with what you are trying to look at. If you're looking in terms of Amur falcon here, the termites are an important species. Amur falcon, AMUR. Let me just type it out here. So This bird breeds in Siberia and Far East Russia, and then goes into Africa for you know for wintering. So yeah, I hope that was okay, clear, or anything else you want to discuss anything else from that topic. Yep, welcome. Yeah, I'm waiting. If you have any more doubts, yeah, we can discuss them a little more. Yep. Okay. It seems like we don't have any doubts. I'll wait for five more minutes here, in case somebody wants to ask anything. But or else, yeah, we'll stop. I'll wait for 5 more minutes. Okay. Yeah. Seems no one has anything. Okay. Then in that case, we'll end the session here. Thank you for joining, and yeah. Uh, bye. Then. Yeah. Yeah, the session will be is currently being recorded, but the thing is, since I'm in a region where I don't have much connectivity, it will be put up in YouTube, but not anytime soon. At least a month later, when I go back from my field, it will be put up in the YouTube. I will share the YouTube channel in the next session. But yeah, I'm extremely sorry that I'm not be able to do it now, but I will try to put it up as soon as I can. Okay, I will share the YouTube channel link where you can access the video recordings of the class, and then I think you can also get it through that NPTEL portal. Sorry. Yeah. Okay then. Bye everyone. Thank you for joining for today's session.